For years then, we haven't even copyrighted our material. We allow people to copy it, to give it away. That's what we want.
Eric Hovind's got a new sidekick, and their only superpower is generating straw. Welcome to Paulogia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians.
Welcome to the Creation Today show. I'm your host, Eric Hovind, and I'm joined by the president of Ask or Think Ministries, Ben Schettler.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for tuning in. A decision I promise you, you will not regret.
You know what, Ben? I kind of already do. Ben came on to Creation Today in Season 3, presumably to inject some animated excitement into the show, like Rob Lowe on Parks and Recreation, or Amy and Bernadette on Big Bang Theory, or Chang and Community, or Woody on Cheers. I don't know, you pick a show you like. I kind of want to think of Ben as Aqualad to Eric's Aquaman, but it looks like Jason Momoa is going to make Aquaman actually cool in the new Justice League movie, so let me think.
No way!
Ah! That works good!
Sure, why not? Eric and Ben think that the Flintstones is based on a true story, so let's go with Barney to Eric's Fred.
Ben, go over and apologize right now.
Before we follow Ben, let me plug in this clip from episode 28.
This is an example of a straw man argument. We want to blow those away. I hear these all the time from atheists and evolutionists. They're always setting up straw man arguments.
Now trust me when I say, or check the episode yourself, the long-winded example Eric gave was deliciously ironically not a straw man. A straw man of a straw man, as it were. But correct usage later tells me that Eric and Ben do know what a straw man is. If the term is new to you, a straw man argument is substituting a person's actual position with a distorted, exaggerated, or misrepresented version of the position in order to more easily refute the distorted version, ignoring the one actually presented. And cue Ben.
Well, if you don't have an explanation for how it all began, then why do you say that Darwinian evolution explains the origins of the world?
While this is a common misconception, Darwinian evolution has never been an attempt to explain the origins of the world.
This is an example of a straw man argument.
Darwinian evolution, probably better expressed as the theory of biological evolution, since we've learned a lot in the last 150 years, is the explanation for the diversity of life on Earth through a change in heritable characteristics of populations over successive generations stemming from a common ancestor. If you actually read Darwin's breakthrough Origin of the Species, you will not find any reference to the origins of the world, to the formation of our planet Earth. Darwin's story starts after the first replicating biological compounds already exist, although he didn't know anything about RNA or DNA at the time. So evolution covers diversity of life, which is maybe this part of the timeline. For the origin of the Earth, one has to look to the science of cosmology. The term cosmology was first used by Thomas Blunt back in 1656, over 200 years before Darwin published his theory. Cosmology is the brand of astronomy that studies the large-scale properties of the universe as a whole, beginning with the Big Bang. Despite the name, the Big Bang was not an explosion, but rather a rapid expansion of matter and energy some 13.8 billion years ago. This event is attested to by multiple converging lines of independent evidence, including Einstein's theory of relativity, Hubble's law, and cosmic microwave background radiation. I'm sure I'll do separate videos on these at some point. Eventually, atoms formed from that material. Eventually, stars formed from atoms. Around our particular star, gas and dust gathered into rocky material that kept colliding and reforming to eventually settle into asteroids, planets, and moons. This is obviously very simplified, but we're not actually here today to discuss the formation of the Earth. If it interests you, I'd encourage you to research more. So, that's the science of cosmology, not the science of evolution. These are separate things that do not attempt to explain the other. But from the rest of Ben's speech, I think he actually meant origin of life rather than origin of the Earth. The science that studies the origin of life is called abiogenesis. It studies the generation of organic material from inorganic material, combining the disciplines of chemistry, biology, and geophysics. I'll talk more about this later, but all that's important for now is to understand that abiogenesis is a discipline entirely separate from both cosmology and evolutionary biology. Imagine you were an expert in culinary food science. You would know not only what it takes to make food delicious, but also understand all the chemistry and physics that go into making ice cream smooth and crystal-free, or a cake to perfectly rise and be fluffy every time. Now imagine Ben coming up to you and saying, "Hey, you can't possibly know how to bake a cake because you can't explain to me how wheat comes from seeds." You would rightfully point out to Ben that he's not looking for culinary science, he's looking for horticulture or agriculture. While wheat may be necessary to practice your baking, your expertise starts with the bag of flour on the grocery store shelf. You might also point out to Ben that he should consider a digestive specialist to tell him how his body will convert the cake into energy, or a nutritional scientist to tell him how much energy and fat is involved. These are related sciences, but they do not even attempt to answer the same questions. So it is with cosmology, abiogenesis, and biological evolution.
It's either one or the other. Either you have an explanation for the origins of the world, or you don't. Taking the idea of our origin further in a different interview, Richard Dawkins deals with the hypothesis that our origin could be explained by a sophisticated alien life form coming from another...
No. It's too soon to get sidetracked with aliens. We can talk about this later in the video. I promise we'll talk about it later. Let's just stick to one thing at a time for now, okay?
If Darwinian evolution only claimed to be an explanation of progression, something small turned into something big, then at least you're making an honest claim.
I think we've covered this, right, Ben? Your small to big wording will probably bother some, but I think that's about as close as I can expect you to get. Biological diversity is the only thing evolution attempts to explain.
But they claim evolution explains origins.
No. Only your imaginary strawman version of evolution does that.
What is interesting is further into this interview, Richard Dawkins comes right out and admits that evolution is not a theory of origins.
Admits? Try explains. This is not a hidden dirty secret. Scientists are trying desperately to tell whoever has it confused. I've spent this entire video attempting to explain it to you. Maybe Professor Dawkins can clear it up.
Here's what he says.
When Darwinian scientists explain the origin and evolution of life, what we're doing is explaining the arising of organized complexity and intelligence and the capacity to design. We're explaining how that arises from very simple beginnings, by slow, gradual steps, by slowly mounting a staircase. I call it in another book, climbing Mount Improbable.
Well, I wish the professor hadn't used the staircase analogy, because that may further confuse people into thinking that evolution is a process that makes improvements, makes creatures better, or that it has an objective or goal or something. It doesn't do any of those things. But I think he was clear that evolution has never attempted to explain abiogenesis.
Well, if your theory of origins doesn't answer the question of origins, then not only have you not resorted to magic or the supernatural, you haven't postulated anything. Atheists from Bill Nye to Richard Dawkins may be willing to give you a convoluted theory of lesser to greater, but they refuse to give a legitimate theory to the actual origins of life.
See, I knew Ben would get confused about lesser to greater, but I won't get sidetracked. Perhaps you've picked up that Ben's gripe isn't with evolution, but with abiogenesis. In 1952, the notable Miller-Urey experiment demonstrated that organic compounds could and would arise naturally from inorganic compounds. While there's debate over whether the specific compounds and conditions accurately reflect the conditions on Earth nearly 4 billion years ago, this was a clear demonstration that such a process is possible, clearly contradicting any creationist claims that it is impossible. And such experiments have been repeated and refined in the decades since. But Ben is absolutely right when he says that for now we have only hypotheses, not a unified theory in the scientific sense. This is one of science's most notable areas of we don't know. Not a secret, we don't know. It's partially because of this we don't know that allows millions and millions of Christians around the world to accept and affirm the overwhelming evidence that supports both cosmology and evolution. They find seamless compatibility, allowing for these processes to be how God created without worrying about who created. I'd encourage you to visit the Biologos or Reasons to Believe ministries for how Christians find this balance. That said,
because we weren't there, we cannot know for sure, and we cannot come to God without faith. It is my desire that Richard Dawkins and every atheist understand that the greatest answer to origins isn't, I don't know, but rather, I know God.
While it's entirely possible that a deity had some kind of hand in the origin of life, how is it remotely honest or truthful to replace we don't know with I know for sure that my story is true? There was a time when humanity didn't know what caused thunder and lightning. Were they right to say that it was Thor's hammer, or should they have stuck to we don't know? This line of thinking is unpleasantly called an argument from ignorance. Not that the person who makes it is dumb, it means ignorance in the lack of knowledge sense. Or sometimes the God of the Gaps argument. But I've been talking too much. Let me hand this off to Neil deGrasse Tyson.
If you want to say that where we don't understand things, that's where God rests, that's where God operates, the God of the Gaps argument, because I get asked that all the time. What was around before the universe? I don't know. Must have been something, God. So they got to stick in God where we're not there yet. And I just say, we got top people working on that. It's a current frontier. We're not there yet. And given the history of the moving frontier, where people had previously said, well, God must be operating, we're long past that. Those explanations have come. And so there's no compelling reason to say God did it and then sort of give up and go on to the next problem.
And that's my apology.
Apology accepted, Ben. Though I wish I could believe it'll be the last time. What?
And now we learn that we're not even special in the entire universe because there is Superman.
Oh, right, the alien thing. Guess I promised. You may have heard of panspermia, the science fiction-like thought experiment that perhaps life on Earth was planted here by some kind of alien race. An idea explored with the engineers in the Alien prequel Prometheus, or in the classic Star Trek Next Generation episode, The Chase. Evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins became the target of seemingly endless strawman accusations that he is a proponent of panspermia after he sat down with Ben Stein for Ben's embarrassingly disingenuous documentary, Expelled.
Hello, Professor Dawkins. How are you? I'm Ben Stein. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet.
And now I shall let Professor Dawkins explain, in his own words, what happened here.
I, at that time, had never heard of Ben Stein, and I had been duped by a man called Mathis into taking part in a film which I thought was a serious exploration of science and religion. That's what I was told. I only much later discovered that it was a creationist front and that I had been fooled into doing something that I would never normally have done. When I spoke to Ben Stein, I took him seriously. I thought he was, well, until the end of that interview, as you saw. And when he asked me that question, something like, could you ever imagine any kind of intelligent design? I bent over backwards to try to give intelligent design its best shot. Its best shot for me was something like design by an alien intelligence, something like what Francis Crick and Leslie Orgel had proposed as directed panspermia. I don't believe in that. I didn't believe in that. I never said I did believe in that. But I was trying to bend over backwards to give intelligent design its best shot.
No good deed goes unquote mined. With Dawkins having answered this question over and over since then, it's well known that he doesn't actually hold to this view. So what do we call it again when someone deliberately distorts someone else's position?
This is an example of a straw man argument.
A straw man.
But he puts this very interesting qualifier on that outside alien force. In this hypothetical scenario, whoever started this world would still have had to have evolved from something. Well, you may have answered the question of origins for humankind, but you still have not answered the ultimate question of origins.
And that's exactly why panspermia is considered no more than an interesting thought experiment. Scientists are not putting this forth as an origins theory because it doesn't address origins. You've created an entire army of straw men, Ben.
Enough is enough.
Right?
And that's my apology.
Thank you. Do you know someone who's understandably confused about the difference between evolution and abiogenesis? It wasn't long ago that I had no idea. If so, please send them a link to this video so we can all learn together. While you're here, please click like or dislike, subscribe if you haven't already, or drop me a comment to let me know how I'm doing. Later.